This is Defender Radio. I'm Michael Howie, and this is Defender Radio, the podcast for wildlife advocates and animal lovers, brought to you by the Fur Bearers. I'm very excited to be able to share this episode with you because it's a bit of a launch, too. The Fur Bearers is making a documentary. That's right, we're working with renowned wildlife photographer John E. Marriott in the Exposed Wildlife Conservancy team to create a documentary series on snares and trapping in Canada called Trapped in the Past. The series, which is set to release November 2022, will ask hard questions about snaring and trapping in Canada and incorporate all perspectives, including those of trappers, biologists, Indigenous leaders, and advocates. Trapped in the Past is poised to be a game changer for Canadians and for the hundreds of thousands of animals killed in traps every year. To talk about this new project and share the details of our incredible upcoming Giving Tuesday challenge, I was joined by John E. Marriott and Kim Odland of Exposed Wildlife Conservancy. More info on our Giving Tuesday challenge, a teaser trailer, and links to donate are available in the show notes. The idea for this project, I think that's the place to start. And John, maybe you could share a bit about what happened. And I think we're going back about a year and a half or 2 years now, 2019 or so. With Craig and a wolf in Alberta. Could you share a bit about that story and what conversations it led to?
Yeah, so in January 20th, 2019, I got a phone call from a person that I did not know, left a message for me and said, "Can you call me back right away? I found a wolf alive in a trap in Kananaskis country, so just south of where I live in Canmore, Alberta, in the Rocky Mountains." I actually did not check my voicemails that night. I got it the next morning and I was like, oh my gosh, what the heck is this? And phoned the person back right away and was introduced to a guy called Craig Comstock, who told me this harrowing tale of being out hiking with his dogs and his girlfriend in Kananaskis country and coming across what he soon determined was a trap line because his dog got into digging into a carcass and dug up a frozen fox carcass and then started looking around and saw coyote carcasses and wolf carcasses, and they continued down the trail and found another area like this, continued on further, found another area, heard a sound in the bush, went in and investigated and found a live wolf stood up right beside him with its back leg caught in a snare. And this all kind of unfolded extremely quickly. Then I got off the phone with him and I immediately, the very next day, drove down in the dark to this trap line. He gave me explicit directions how to get there. I mountain biked, I fat biked out so I could get out there as quickly as possible, hoping to find this wolf still. I took wire cutters with me, all kinds of stuff, just in case. You know, it's obviously illegal to tamper with the trap line, so I was prepared if I was going to try and cut this wolf loose, I was going to have to compensate the trapper for it and let him know that what I had done, because what he was doing was totally legal at this point, I thought, or I surmised. Anyways, I got out there and the wolf was no longer there. There was a big blood stain there and the wolf had obviously been killed and cut loose. And it set a chain of events into progress that led to 3 weeks later us releasing through the Exposed with Johnny Marriott at the time. This was before we had started the Exposed Wildlife Conservancy. And it started, we released, this 10-minute snaring episode that included interviews with Craig and his partner Tara. And we went down and actually were on site and we had video from the trap line. And it was a really well-received episode, heard from members all over government in Alberta and British Columbia, as well as in Montana and Wyoming. So it was really impactful in that sense. And after that, Craig just couldn't let it sit. We continued on. We made another episode after hearing from you guys, actually, from the Fur Bearers. I've been involved with the Fur Bearers for 4 or 5 years now, and had heard from you guys, from your executive director at the time, Leslie, had said that geez, you guys got to do something on pets because we're getting all these reports of pets getting caught in snares. And so we did. We followed up and we did a report with a fellow from Calgary called Rodney, who had his dog caught in a snare on a hike also that winter of 2019 and almost lost his dog. Was frantic. It was actually the exact same trap line that Craig had encountered the live wolf on, by I guess, unfortunate circumstance. And anyways, Craig, off on the sidelines, just started digging into all this stuff on his own and started researching things and going, I don't understand why this is legal and why, this guy had just had carcasses strewn all over the place. And he has this beautiful cabin built in the wilderness and he's allowed to drive down a logging road that nobody else is allowed to go on. And he just couldn't understand any of this. And he started digging in and phoning government officials and Fish and Wildlife and RCMP and trying to. He kept getting back all the same arguments over and over again, these same points, it's the economic impact, it has a positive economic impact. It's stewardship of the wilderness, it's conservation, it's, and on and on. And he started recording all these arguments, same points by the same people over and over again and going, this can't be right. And he eventually came back to us, and us being Kim Odland and myself. So Kim is the co-founder of Exposed with me. And in the meantime, we had started the Exposed Wildlife Conservancy in March of 2020. And when he came back to us, he had this script written up. And I approached Leslie with the fur bearers and said, hey, we've got this idea of producing this documentary series tackling not only snaring, but the trapping industry in general, and asking some of these tough questions and kind of revisiting, should these regulations be updated? Some of them are completely archaic. Many of the trapping regulations in Canada were set in the 1930s. So they're completely out of touch with where we are today as a society. And so Leslie was, absolutely just, gung-ho is not even a strong enough word. She was like, oh my gosh, this is stuff this has been in our mandate since we began. And I think maybe you can, you had a conversation with her early on, didn't you?
Oh yeah, when Leslie first informed me that she had been in conversation, I think the conversation we had more or less went, so I was talking about doing a trapping documentary with John. I said, John who? She said, John Marriott. And I said, okay, let's do it. Because we have worked together frequently on media projects. And as you noted, you've been on Defender Radio, and we have been fortunate to receive your photos, both for use in content and educational stuff, but also to help us fundraise and do things like that. And it just felt like such a natural fit for these two groups to come together on this project. And I think we're all equally excited at this point. Now, Kim, last night, for folks knowing, this is November 17th right now, and Exposed Wildlife Conservancy had a cool sort of fireside chat with a bunch of their special insiders, supporters. And we spoke about this project. And Kim, you made the great point of identifying the scope of this as you learned more about it. I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that sort of insight you had.
Absolutely, Michael. I think that was, to me, it was really mind-blowing, to be honest, when I realized, or when we found out or understood that just the amount of animals that are killed in traps every year. And our feeling is that something I wasn't even aware of. In fact, I didn't even realize that trapping still existed. That seems like something more out of our history or something you'd read about, but the fact that it was still going on. And I think more surprising to me was to the extent there's literally hundreds of thousands of animals that are trapped and killed every year in Canada. And so the numbers to me were just staggering. And so I guess that was really what opened my eyes to the whole situation. And with John and with our conservancy, with the Exposed Wildlife Conservancy, that just seemed a topic that we should absolutely find more about.
Yeah, and it's I think that is the experience of so many people, and that's what's been fascinating for me at the Fur Bearers is I have had the experience of interviewing people who have lost pets or have come across animals who were in pain or suffering from traps. And interviewed them and documented that. And it is a tragedy and a trauma every time for the people who go through this. But the thing that really sticks with me is that folks don't know it's happening. And as John pointed out, I think one of the big issues is the way, like the trapping regulations have not changed significantly in a long time, but the way we are using outdoor spaces is changing constantly. So there are more people going out and hiking or snowshoeing or cycling in the winter. And people are walking their dogs on old agricultural properties. Or even in the suburbs, we end up seeing traps get used by people who read government endorsement of trapping. And as Kim experienced again, the ease of getting these traps is almost ridiculous, considering it's supposed to be a very highly regulated industry. One of the questions that came up last night, and I thought we'd talk briefly about today, though, is how are we going to be able to put together a fair documentary on this? The intent at this point is that there will be incorporated viewpoints of trappers, of biologists, of government agents, of Indigenous leaders and communities. What is the approach that the documentary team is going to take in order to ensure that it isn't just us saying traps are bad and let's get rid of them?
I think it's key that we include those perspectives, and to get those perspectives we have to be, we're going to have to be pretty clear with the groups that we talk to, particularly when we talk to trappers or trapping associations or government officials, that this is not a witch hunt. We just want to get the awareness out there and educate people as to what's going on, and then let people make decisions whether they think this is something we should still be including in society. And so for me, one of the things I often try and think about, I obviously have a bias towards not wanting trapping to continue. Mm-hmm. And yet I have a couple of experiences from my past where I have had fairly good relationships with trappers and still do to this day. And so I think they will help us sort of structure how we approach the documentary. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. One, back when I first went to the Yukon in 2002, I was driving up a highway called the Campbell Highway, which is not actually a highway at all. It's a dirt road in the middle of nowhere with really no towns on it. There's one town along it on 700 kilometers, and that town has 200 people in it. Driving along it, middle of nowhere, haven't seen anybody all day, and I pass a broken down truck on the side of the road with a very sketchy looking character standing there with the hood open, and I drive by, and of course, a couple hundred meters later, go, okay, I can't just drive by and not turn around. So I turn around and I come back and ask the fella if he needs help, and turns out he does. He needs a ride to his place. So he gets in, and he looks like he has stepped out of 1897 Klondike Gold Rush. Big silvery beard, and introduces himself as Ivan, and gets into my car, and we drive down and go into his place. And as we drive down the long driveway to his place and arrive at his house, it is a sort of a ramshackle property with stuff strewn about everywhere, including skulls and furs and all this crazy stuff. And I very quickly learned that he is a trapper. That's how he supports himself. Now, through the years, I've stayed in touch with him. His wife has a real job with the government of Yukon. But he at that time, told me he made about $7,000 a year. And that was his income, besides a few government subsidies and things like that, and it was very interesting talking to him. And it was a side of trapping that I had never seen before. He literally lived in the bush. Yep. And he was operating a snowmobile that looked like it was from 1965. And, he obviously was not spending a lot of money. And you could see he was doing it because he loved being out in nature. And it was he had so many things in common with me. I ended up staying there for 6 hours. The one key difference was I don't kill things.
Yep.
And so there actually are, and I've noticed this with a lot of trappers I've met since, is a lot of them do have that same love of the wilderness. There is just that one thing that kind of separates them from me. So my current relationships with trappers, I know a couple of trappers up in the Grand Cache area who I have stayed. So Grand Cache is in north central Alberta, still in the Rocky Mountains. And I have stayed in touch with them because they are extraordinary proponents of conservation of caribou up there. And they have the Alopesh herd roams through their trap line, and they are the whistleblowers for when new cut blocks are coming in and new roads are getting plowed in, and stuff is going on. So they were the whistleblowers when the poisoning campaign started 15 years ago. And so it has opened my eyes a bit to, trappers are not all bad. We're not trying to penalize the trappers. What we're trying to change is some of the policy that is going back and is so archaic. And interestingly enough, these trappers are not out there trapping wolves. They go and they run a trap line, and I think they do it almost more to be out in nature. They don't necessarily kill a lot of stuff. So it's kind of a flip side versus this guy in Kananaskis whose trap line we came across, who's driving a big diesel truck, built a big brand new cabin, probably cost him, couple $100,000. He's the only one who gets to build a cabin there. He's the only one who gets to drive that road, and he kills everything. He literally, there's no management going on. There's no stewardship. He is just killing as much stuff as he can and throwing the bodies, casting them aside. Lynx, wolf, coyote, foxes, all the bycatch, who knows what else he's catching. He's killing stuff to bait the traps. So we found all kinds of beaver carcasses all over the place where he's using those as bait to pull the wolves in. He shot a moose to use the moose carcass to bait wolves and other stuff. So that's the flip side of things. And that's the type of trapper that, I'll be honest, I just have no sympathy or empathy for. This sort of spans the full breadth of trapping. You've got and we haven't even covered the Indigenous side, which, there are people up in Northern Canada who like Ivan was not Indigenous, but who like Ivan may make $10,000 a year, and that's helping to support them and their family. So we're going to have to tread carefully, and we're going to have to tell the whole story and then let people decide for themselves. Should we be changing some of these regulations? Should we be, first and foremost, one of this big campaign that we're starting, we want to ban snares. There is no discounting that snares are not efficient, they are not humane, and they should not be allowed. From an animal welfare issue, it's got nothing to do with conservation or anything. This is animal welfare. We're letting wild animals choke to death, and it's not quick and it's not painless. It's a torturous death. And many of them don't even choke to death. They just lay there in the trap and fight. And eventually the trapper comes along and dispatches them, kills them, murders them, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it's important to me, and I think to the fur bearers as well, and I think our audience will really appreciate this mindset of, while we have a clear ideological difference often with people, there are a lot of commonalities, and there is a scope of people. There is a lot of history. There is a lot of other stuff that is woven into this. And I think it'll be so important to give the opportunity to hear that, because it is easy to say, well, we're just going to change it. But it is harder to recognize that even if we believe we are in the right, we are going to have an impact on people's lives and on the way people live. And that has to be considered and heard. So I think it is not only just appropriate to do, but also a respectful way of looking at society and how we want to move forward. And the format of asking questions of all of the people is something that and again, as a former journalist, absolutely love that idea. We're not going to tell you, we're going to let these people tell you what they know. So whether they are a trapper or the Association of Trappers or a biologist who supports it or a biologist who doesn't support it, we're going to hear those different perspectives. And I think that is a very important element of any educational efforts. Although agreed, the snare stuff is really terrible. And there's a lot of data right now, too, illustrating that it's really terrible. And I encourage folks to look through the library of Defender Radio podcasts to find more on snaring. In terms of the project, though, moving forward, we've got a teaser that's out now. We've got a huge Giving Tuesday opportunity coming up that we'll circle back to. But in terms of the actual production and so on, we're going to be asking people to help fund this. What is the production methodology? And maybe, Kim, if you want to speak to that, it's still being developed and finalized. But what are the kinds of steps that need to be taken now and moving into winter with filming and everything?
I think the first step that we're undertaking right now is really on the research side of things. We need to investigate and find out as much about trapping across Canada that we can. So there'll be a lot of time and effort put into the research side. We then have to get involved in different people that we need to talk to. So we've started reaching out to a number of different organizations and different people and contacts that we have to try and set up some of the interviews that we want to do. And then I think the overriding thing is the story. And we have got a real good start on our storyline. And then our intention is to break it into more of segments, because it is such a broad topic and there's so many different varying opinions and different ideas and different thoughts that we can go. Our intention is to break it into 10 to 15 minute segments, and each of these will take on a different topic. So we would talk specifically to trappers as an example. And then we might go and we would have a segment that we would talk more from an environment or a governmental view of things. So our intention is to combine then these different segments into an overriding documentary that would be an hour and a half documentary that we would then have available for broadcast or on the internet, that kind of type of thing.
Yeah, and I think we're going to be looking at festivals and things like that as well in 2022-23, which is going to be really exciting because that's where a lot of environmental stories end up getting that additional attention and getting an international platform. As we've said, one of the hardest things to deal with in talking about trapping is getting people to realize that it is current and is not all that far out of the way. Now, let's talk a bit about Giving Tuesday, because this is exciting on both sides. So as everyone knows, Giving Tuesday is the Tuesday following Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and the opportunity to be altruistic and donate to important causes. And both the Fur Bears and Exposed Wildlife Conservancy this year have successfully navigated this to the point that we both have challenges on the horizon for that week. And John, I'll let you talk a bit about it.
Yeah, sure. So we've both been very fortunate to have a couple of donors step up on both sides with the Fur Bears and with the Exposed Wildlife Conservancy. And they have challenged the rest of our donors, so the rest of our donor base, to raise $10,000 on each side of the equation. So for Exposed, we've had a couple donors step up and say they're going to give us 10,000 if we can raise 10,000 on our own. So that will match it and turn it up to 20,000. And Fur Bears says, you guys have had one donor step up and you got the exact same thing. So I think it provides a very unique opportunity for us to get quite a ways into getting our budget for this documentary series off to a fantastic start so that we can immediately, December 1st, start with our next steps, which, as Kim alluded to, are our planning and research and starting to organize our interviews and our filming for this winter and creating that story arc that is all going to lead to then the spring and summer, which will be all the post-production, putting the documentary together, all the different episodes and so on. And so to do all that, we need money up front. We've got to have people in place and we've, as Exposed on our side of things, we've got experience making the documentaries, having just made a grizzly one this spring for Alberta's trophy grizzly bear hunt, or the potential of it returning. And then from the Fur Bear side, we're going to be utilizing you guys, of course, for your expertise and your experience. And, we just, to be able to tap into you and Leslie at any point is invaluable to us in this process. So yeah, I think Giving Tuesday is this just incredibly unique opportunity. And really, whether people are able to donate $25 or $2,500, it doesn't really matter. It all helps us. And it has so much value, because when you think that in Canada, we have hundreds of thousands of animals die each winter, as Kim mentioned earlier. And that is everything from wolves and wolverines all the way down to the muskrats and the pine martens and the weasels, the little guys. So people have the potential with just $25, for instance. If this works and we are able to have an impact on trapping, people could potentially in the future be saving, with $25, saving 50 animals a winter. It's staggering to think that you can have that much of an impact with so little money. So I think this is just an extremely unique opportunity for people to help out the fur bearers, to help out Exposed. And really doesn't matter which side you donate to, it's all going into the same chest at the end. It's all going to this documentary series. And then we're really hoping to carry this on beyond that documentary series. This is not a one-off, come November next year and we release it. Oh, we're all done. No, we're hoping that it's going to be successful and that we continue this campaign and then move into policy and advocacy within government and so on. So, yeah, I think.
Yeah. So, Kim, could you tell us a bit about some of the fun rewards or opportunities that exist for donors as part of the Giving Tuesday week?
Absolutely, Michael. We really want to make this a collaborative effort. Certainly we are with the fur bearers and with our donors and people that get involved. So we've got different giving levels that we're going to reward our donors with different recognition, I would say. So as an executive producer for a $5,000 donation, you become an executive producer of this project. You'll be, your name or organization will be at the beginning and at the end of our documentary. $2,500 is an associate producer, which will give you recognition at the end of the documentary. And even to the point of $100 donation, we'll be giving an electronic script of the entire documentary to every donors of $100. And we're looking at every opportunity at all different levels of giving. So we're hoping to reward everyone that can get involved with this project.
Yeah, and it's a great way, I think, especially for folks who are really passionate about this subject, to not only be a part of it and help it get made, but then to be able to look back and say, this is a thing I did. This is something that I contributed to and I helped make happen. And it sounds a little silly sometimes, but I personally, it feels good to have that kind of, this is something I accomplished and I'm proud of that. And I was able to help out in this way. So I think it's a great opportunity. And frankly, too, if you've got someone in your life who loves wildlife, this would make a heck of a gift. By the way, a $5,000 donation made in your name, and you get to be the executive producer on a documentary that's going to challenge snares and trapping in Canada for all of time. Like that's going to be nice to open, depending on the day of the month you like to open things on. So definitely encourage people to check that out. And for folks who do want to learn more about Exposed Wildlife Conservancy, because you guys are relatively new, what other projects have you been working on just before we wrap up, and how people can learn more about Exposed and this project?
Yeah, so we have a number of main projects. I would say our primary campaigns right now are snaring and trapping. So this one that is just launching here with this Giving Tuesday campaign with the fur bearers. We have just completed the Alberta grizzly bear documentary that I had mentioned earlier, which is regarding the potential of the trophy grizzly bear hunt returning in the province. And so it was to raise awareness about the issue. We have in the past done several episodes about the British Columbia grizzly bear trophy hunt, and we were integral in helping shut that down. So in 2017, the province of BC put a moratorium on the grizzly bear hunt. And so that was a huge success for conservationists and environmentalists. And for our group, it was, to be able to see that success, tangible success, was something that really made us think, hey, we can make a difference. We can help provide our wildlife with a voice. And I think fur bearers has also had some great successes, including mink farms very recently. So, you know all about what we're talking about there. So grizzly bears is always kind of an ongoing project for us. We touch back on it here and there. We've made 3 episodes about the BC hunt and then a documentary about the Alberta potential for the Alberta hunt. And we're looking at potentially moving into the Yukon in the future. And then our other campaign that I guess is going to be getting off the ground at some point in the near future here, and that I personally have been working behind the scenes quite a bit on, is hound hunting. So
that's a good
hounds to hunt, cougars, lynx, bobcat, most of our cats, even black bears in some provinces.
Coyotes often
Coyotes,
too.
Even wolves. So that's one that we really want to dig our teeth into as we go forward. And it's one I've been, as I mentioned, been working behind the scenes, tracking cougars a lot last winter, trying to get footage and stills of some of these big apex predators so that we've got some stuff to use as we start fundraising and going into the future with that. So, another one that will be not necessarily partnering with the fur bearers on, but obviously one you guys will have some skin in the game on, because those are fur-bearing animals again.
Yep. And I'm sure we'll also be talking about that on a future Defender Radio podcast and so on. Hound hunting is one that I've known about for many years, but not had an opportunity to engage on for a variety of reasons. So that's very exciting for me personally to hear that. That's one of the projects you guys are going to be working on in the future. And folks who are interested in learning more, you've got exposedwc.org and a bunch of social channels that'll all be linked. Is there anything else folks need to be aware of about this project or how they can be involved?
I think from my perspective anyways, there's another really key way people can be involved, and that is to help share everything on social media with friends, with family. So even if you yourself can't give $25, $2,500, whatever it might be, maybe you know someone who can, and you love wildlife, and you say, hey, you know what, I would love this as a gift. Can you help support this conservancy for the holiday season? Can you help support the fur bearers for the holiday season? Can you help support this project? And if you can't even do that, just share it. Help us get the word out. Share the Defender podcast. This podcast is one of the top 100 on Apple Podcasts for nature and environment, and help it get into the top 10. Get the word out there. It's a great podcast that I've been fortunate enough to be a part of a couple times in the past. Go look up those old podcasts and listen to them. I think Michael and I did a pretty good job on them. And then I wanted to say, probably on behalf of Kim and I'll let Kim speak for himself in a second here, but just how much of a pleasure it is to work with the fur bearers and to have that expertise and experience behind this project. I mentioned earlier the word invaluable, and it really truly is. And I feel so fortunate that we are able to partner up with a group like you guys that is so ensconced in Canadian naturalist minds and people that love animals. And so I think it's, we're going to ride a bit on your coattails for this one. And we just thank you for letting us be involved with you.
Of course.
Yeah, I think very well said, John. I think we're stronger together. And I think when Exposed started, we used the name obviously as a reference to photography, but really for me personally, it was just having an understanding, seeing what was actually going on with nature and our outdoors and animals, and that I hadn't really been aware of. And so when you talk about sharing it with your friends and people John, that's so critical for us. And it really is the foundation of the Exposed Wildlife Conservancy, in that we want to expose people to what is going on the ground. And I think in many cases, that's really the answer, is to just let people know what's going on and be able to show people and tell stories and explain to them what is actually going on. And so the snaring and trapping is a perfect example of that. I think many people don't really even understand that it's still going on to the extent it is. Hound hunting, there's a number of topics in our wildlife and the management or lack thereof that people just aren't aware of. So if you can share it and tell people and spread it around and tell your friends and relatives, it's invaluable for us to have that message out there for sure.
You can learn more about this project and get involved at thefurbearers.com/trapped, on the Exposed Conservancy website at exposedwc.org, or by following the links in your podcast player's show notes or at defenderradio.com. I want to thank John and Kim for their time. All of us have been working around the clock to get this project ready for Giving Tuesday, and I really appreciate the time given to chat for the podcast. You can follow Exposed Wildlife Conservancy on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and learn more about them at exposedwc.org. You can also find John's photography on social media by searching John E. Marriott or at wildernessprints.com. I really hope you're able to contribute to this project. It's the kind of opportunity that can make a real, long-term impact for an awful lot of people and animals. From $5 to $5,000, every penny helps get this documentary a step closer to being in front of millions of Canadians. Direct links are in your podcast player app and in the show notes at defenderradio.com. That's it for this week, folks, but we'll be back with more episodes of Defender Radio and The Switch next week. Remember to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Howie Michael and on Facebook at Defender Radio Podcast. Sign up for email updates at defenderradio.com. Until next time, I'm Michael Howie for Defender Radio and the Fur Bearers. Thank you for listening.